I would like to welcome Stacy Miller, who's with PPG today. Stacy is the Senior Social and Media Relations Manager for Cision. Stacy, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
I'd like to ask you, what is Cision and what does it do?
Sure. Cision is a global media intelligence company, and we serve the needs of today's communicators, marketers, and PR pros. What that means exactly is that we provide software that helps public relations and communications professionals reach, engage, and analyze their audiences. So for everyone from small businesses and nonprofits all the way up to enterprise corporations, we provide PR software that helps them with media outreach, social media software that helps them monitor, engage, and analyze conversations, influencer marketing software that helps them identify audiences that are important to them, as well as a much wider array of even more solutions to help you engage the people who are important to your brand.
My company, PPG Interactive, has used Cision, which was previously Vocus, right? You all purchased.
Yep, we merged with Vocus in 2014.
Okay, one of the aspects of Cision that I would like to talk with you about is the wide outreach that you have to media stakeholders. Maybe you can talk about how many media representatives and media people are on the Cision system and how you break that down for organizations that are like, for instance, automotive. How do you break that down into their particular interests?
Cision has over 1.6 million media contacts, outlets, and opportunities. So what that means is we have over 1.6 million people or media outlets. So the newspapers, magazines, TV shows, blogs, podcasts, etc., and opportunities. So we also have a really great service called HARO, which stands for Help Reporter Out, that actually delivers media opportunities or stories that reporters are working on to your inbox so that you can then pitch the reporter based on your business. Now, all of those opportunities are really easily searchable and segmented based on your industry or your interests. So you mentioned automotive earlier, finance, education, law, pharmaceutical, every industry under the sun, you'll be able to find a media outlet or contact for using Cision Media Intelligence. And then what we do is we give you all the information that you need to reach out to them and then create really valuable relationships. Last year, we also acquired Orkana, which is another one of the world's leading media databases out of the UK, and we've added their premium data to our software recently. So Cision really does offer some of the most robust information and intelligence on the media today.
So there are potentially, depending on what kind of client we are representing as a small PR social media firm, we could potentially reach out through Cision to hundreds and thousands of important stakeholders in, for instance, as we talked about automotive, but manufacturing of any kind, and maybe even for very specialty things. How about something like food sustainability or aquaculture?
The possibilities are endless. What we do is we segment them on a number of factors, and the list can just be targeted, and you can really drill down into exactly what matters to you. So we have broad categories, and then within those categories, there's more categories, and within those categories, there's keywords. We have an entire team of humans that goes through and researches all of these media contacts and media outlets to make sure that we know exactly what they cover, exactly what their topics of interest are, and what they talk about. So that way you can find exactly who's right to you, so you know that you're doing really targeted outreach.
Great. Well, let's drill down a little further into what are some of the benefits of using Cision. Let's start with very small enterprises like nonprofit organizations, and then we can talk maybe about larger corporations and their needs.
Absolutely. So some of the benefits, especially on the nonprofit side, are really just being able to tell your story to the right audience at the right time. And I'll give you an example. We have one nonprofit client, their name is The Last Well. And what their mission was to do is to provide clean water in Liberia to every person by 2020. That's a huge goal, right? So what they needed to do was get the word out about what was happening in Liberia, why Ebola was spreading, why they needed fresh water, what would happen if they didn't get fresh water. And they came to Cision. And we listened to the needs that they had and what they were trying to accomplish, which was greater reach, greater awareness for this nonprofit. And we suggested to them, okay, how about we do a PR web release? So they went out, they did some PR web press release, they did some media outreach. And because of the program that we put them on, they were able to save 8,600 lives by raising money through this media outreach and the press releases. It's an incredibly powerful increase in reach from what they had before. And we're so proud to kind of have that case study just from using our PR Web press release service.
That is fabulous. So the people from the last well were able to reach stakeholders. They moved hearts and minds to donate to their foundation or their nonprofit organization so they could help people in Liberia to obtain access to clean water. Is that right?
That's exactly it. And not only just the press release, right? So we're probably going to talk about a little bit later other tactics nonprofits can use to expand their story and expand their reach. So, press release distribution and media outreach is just one part of the puzzle. Social media is also really important to nonprofits, and the last well used social media channels to help expand their reach, which Cision also does. So we provide social media software and monitoring and ways to engage with those audiences. So the combination of distributing a really targeted press release to increase awareness and reach, and then engaging on social media with target audiences, again, to increase awareness and reach, helped this nonprofit reach their goals.
I'm assuming it's a fairly smaller nonprofit organization. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about a large for-profit corporation. They have access to every kind of tool out there. What can Cision do for them that maybe their ginormous public relations firm or advertising agency isn't already doing?
Absolutely. So some of our larger enterprise clients, they use Cision in a variety of ways, and those solutions go deeper into our monitoring and into our insights. And one thing that we're really good at is providing public relations and communications professionals with data to make really great business decisions. So our monitoring software helps them find out exactly what their target audiences are talking about, what their sentiment is on certain subjects, what their share of voice is against competitors, how certain types of news are breaking or how the media is talking about them, how the influencers are talking about them. So not just traditional media, TV, magazine, newspaper, radio, et cetera, but bloggers and people on social media who are shaping the conversations about their brand. And then we provide really, really deep analysis on all of that data that we create, because one of the things that we really follow is that data is nothing without insights. So you can regurgitate data all day, but if you don't know what it means, then you can't really use it in a good way. So by deciphering the data and saying, okay, here's what the data means, here's what our business can do next, is what's been really, really valuable for some of our big clients. We have enterprise clients. And some of those enterprise clients include companies like JetBlue, the city of Los Angeles County, Microsoft has used us, even the Obama 2012 campaign used Cision social data to refine their messaging.
That says something. That was quite the campaign, right?
Quite the campaign. Xerox, the Humane Society of the United States. All these brands have really enterprise PR and communication strategies that require more data, more outreach, more understanding of their target audiences.
You brought up a very interesting point with this, and that is the interpretation of data. How can smaller firms work with their clients to make that data more understandable? Now, I know myself, many times when I've shown data reports back to clients, they'll say, oh, well, that's nice, but that's not really what I'm looking for. And sometimes when I'll ask a client, frankly, they're not even sure what they're looking for. They're not sure how to define their own success in that arena. So what advice would you have for organizations like mine?
That's a really great question. And it really all depends on business goals. So we can start from any data point, really. So for a lot of small nonprofits, entrepreneurs, startups, something that's interesting for them is their audience. They want to know that they have an audience, and they want to know that their audience is growing. So for them, seeing an increase in audience month over month or quarter over quarter is important to them. So measuring followers on social media or conversations or inquiries to their website, that's really important. As we get deeper into the data, it's time to think about, okay, are these audience members affecting my business? And one of the ways I think it's important to think about data for any size business is, how does this data relate to business outcomes? So how does followers relate to business outcomes? How does conversations relate to business outcomes? How does sentiment and how positively or negatively people talk about me relate to business outcomes? So thinking about it in a way that says, how does this affect other things? Instead of thinking about it as just a standalone data point, I think is the most important thing. Because then when you think, okay, how does this affect my business? How does this affect my revenue? How does this affect my sales? You can then think of ways to change and manipulate that data and create strategies to make that data trend the way that you want it to trend in order to affect your bottom line.
Now, Twitter is used all the time by the media. It's used by many, many nonprofit organizations. What I find with our corporate clients is not so much. And they're kind of suspect still of Twitter. Like, okay, what are all these people talking about? Hashtag pizza and hashtag whatever. They really aren't convinced that anybody that's on Twitter is doing anything to help their bottom line. Can you give us some specific examples of how Twitter might be helping to move hearts and minds or establishing somebody as an expert in the space they want to be in?
There are hundreds of case studies about how not only just Twitter, but other social media platforms are huge in helping brands influence the hearts and minds of the audiences that are important to them. So brands today, it's not just about broadcasting on social media. It's about sharing a message. It's about sharing a story, finding other people who identify with that story, and then going out and having those people advocate on your behalf. And that's really the power of social media, right? It's one-to-one interactions. It's being social. It's talking to someone. It's creating relationships. So you see brands like Target and Dunkin' Donuts, all the way down to any size nonprofit, really being able to talk to people and have conversations and learn things about their target audiences that you wouldn't have normally been able to do unless you were in physical proximity of that person. So social media is a huge, huge advantage to anyone who wants to learn more, wants to engage in conversation, and who wants to inform others of their brand mission and have them share that mission. I mean, we could talk all day about case studies. So the Humane Society is a really great one, I think, on Twitter. I know one of their social media managers based out of the Washington, D.C. area, but they use Twitter to inform people of, the puppy mill situations and how, adopt, don't buy. That's one of their biggest campaigns. They also use social media for crowdfunding, which I think is something that's really blown up in the nonprofit space recently, are web-based crowdfunding sites. So whereas nonprofits would have to go out and look for dollars to fund these campaigns and raise awareness, social media and the web has really added fuel to that fire. So you see sites like Kickstarter and CrowdRise and Indiegogo, and there are tons more, GoFundMe, and all the nonprofits are on there, and they create campaigns on these websites. And social media greatly amplifies the reach of the messages on those websites, so they get more donors, they get more users, they get more people that are dedicated to their cause, and then their cause gets more awareness.
Those are good examples, and it is very powerful. I think most of us that use it understand that there is an education curve, however, because there are still a lot of companies and established organizations that don't seem to understand how that can be used. So I think it's just a constant education and reinforcement of that data that you spoke about previously.
I'll also add one more thing to that, and it is that if you're a brand that is not on social media, it's almost too late, because what's happening if you're not on social media, if you're not on a Twitter, if you're not on the networks that your audiences are primarily engaging on, you're missing out on conversations that are valuable opportunities for your brand. So the conversations that can be unsurfaced are plenty. They could be conversations about people trying to figure out what cause they want to support, or people trying to figure out more information on a cause, or people sharing negative sentiment on a cause that might be a myth, that's something that maybe you need to correct, and then that turns that person into an advocate. Or you might be missing out on positive conversations that you can harness and bring that advocate into your organization. And when you're missing out on all those conversations, you're missing out on business opportunities, and you're basically giving them up to your competitors. So that's why it's extremely important to utilize these mediums to your business advantage.
I see that also in the nonprofit area. A lot of people will say things to me in meetings like, oh, we have a part-time intern that every once in a while will just run the Facebook page. And I think, well, that's not a strategy. That's not part of how you're going to really reach out and engage with your stakeholders and, do things that are impactful or tell people about your story. That's just kind of being a me too. So a big part of it is utilizing the resources, and I'll put my own plug in here, agencies and communications professionals to help you with this, because it really isn't just all about going out and getting a Twitter account. I mean, as you've said, Stacy, we've moved well beyond that. And when you look at these sophisticated tools like Cision, people need a professional to take them by the hand and say, we will work this for you, and then we'll show you the benefits of how it works. But I think to launch, as you said very clearly, I think to just try to kind of launch in on your own, even if you have a limited budget at this point, and try to do all these things on your own would be too overwhelming.
There's a lot out there, and the world of social media tools, communications tools, PR and marketing tools, and technology and tactics and strategies is so advanced today. It can take a lot to sift through and figure out, what the right tactics are, what strategy you should use. I mean, there's nothing wrong with going out and finding resources. And I think some of the best communicators today, no matter what size organization they're at, they choose a very careful tool set.
How about taking a little walk through the Cision blog? Looks like you've got some things on there right now that are very interesting. And one of them is a topic about social media influencers. I believe you're going to be speaking on that very topic pretty soon, right, Stacy?
Yeah, we're really excited about that webinar. So we're talking about harnessing influencers as part of your kind of social media toolkit and your media outreach and influence programs. And it's a really interesting tactic. And not every brand does it today, but every brand will be doing it. So influence marketing isn't a new thing. It's, maybe been around since 2011 or so, but it's really exploded in the last year because of the way that the internet and the web and the media has changed. And the way that it's changed is simple. Traditional media, such as TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, etc., aren't the only conversations that influence your brand perception. Now, it's anybody who has a voice is able to influence your brand, is able to influence your buyers, etc. So what influence marketing is finding the people who are in your industry or who talk about your brand and that can influence others to buy your product, to get involved in your cause, who have other people listening to them on whatever platform that they're on. So what that webinar, and it's a free webinar, we'll go through is, what it is, how to do it for a relatively low cost, how to identify the people that are important to you, how to engage them, then how to mobilize them and have them speak on your behalf and get more buyers to your brand. So we like to call it social media on steroids, or like PR on steroids.
What would be an example of an influencer for a nonprofit?
There's kind of two ways to think about influencers. So there's an organic influencer. So there's someone that you come across that's just has a large network and is really engaged on the topic and who has a network that's listening to them that you don't pay. And then there are influencers that you might think of as like an endorsement where they're interested in your cause, but you might pay them a fee in order to advocate on your behalf. Like Sarah McLachlan. So she endorses one of those animal welfare focused organizations and she does the commercials. She's an influencer, right? Because we believe that Sarah loves these animals and she's caring for these animals and she advocates for this organization, but she's a paid influencer. An organic influencer could be someone like me. I could be an influencer to the Humane Society of the U.S. because I go out and I volunteer on the weekends at the animal shelters, and then I post about it on my Facebook, and then my friends say, oh, that looks really cool. I'd love to go help out at the shelter one weekend. And then I bring my friends to the shelter that weekend. And so I got people involved in that cause. So all of a sudden, I've become an influencer to the Humane Society because I've gone out, I've advocated for that cause, and I've brought people in.
Stacy, is that webinar going to be available on your blog?
Yeah, the full replay will be emailed to anyone that registered, and it'll be available for quite a few months afterward.
Okay, terrific. Let's continue on about the blog. You have a discussion about social media influencers on your blog. You also have talked about a term that I found really funny, but so true, infobesity. Mm-hmm. Whoever came up with that is a genius. That is really where we are right now in the world.
Infobesity. Credit to my good friend Mark W. Schaefer for that. He is an incredible marketing strategist out of Tennessee. So shout out to Mark. I absolutely love that term because it explains not only what's happening in the media, but it also explains what's happening to consumers, which is that we live in this world where we're consuming more and more information every minute, every hour, every day. And like as humans, we just can't process that much information. So selectively, we pay attention to certain bits of information over others. And the way that the world and the web and media has evolved is that we pay attention to information now that's less text-based and more multimedia-based, more data-based, because it satisfies the way our brain functions. It satisfies the need for processing. It satisfies the need for visuals. So an important tip I wanted to bring up because of that word infobesity, especially for nonprofits, if you're doing PR on a budget, is to think about how much information there is out in the world and then how to make your information stand out. And this comes directly from reporters that we survey for a yearly report. And it is that in this day and age, reporters are looking for data and they're looking for multimedia and they're looking for visuals to supplement their stories. So in order to stand out, yes, you have to have a great story. Yes, you have to have great relationships. Yes, you have to do great research.
Visual.
have a leg up if you go and you find great branded data that you can offer that they can't get anywhere else. If you create graphics or provide visuals that they can't get anywhere else and make their jobs easier because they're using that data to satisfy their readers.
And one of the things my company actually specializes in, and Ken, who's recording our podcast right now, is a specialist in this area, our own Ken Mitchell, is the whole thing of electronic media, what you and I are doing right now, as well as the video. We do a lot of that for our clients, and it's very impactful and effective.
Extremely, extremely effective. I can't say enough about video as well. So podcasts, obviously, it's not a brand new thing, but I feel like the past year or two, podcasts have really exploded, especially in the world of marketing and PR. Lots of really great podcasts out there, just like this one. And then video. Video is extremely important today, especially when we're talking about social media and multimedia outreach, because video, it captures the attention of viewers. It communicates information in a shorter format, a more digestible format, something that people can scroll through quite easily. And it's what readers crave. All the media outlets, content agencies, they do surveys every year, and videos continue to perform much higher than text or image-based content. So to keep that in mind, I mean, you don't have to be a video producer, have to have anything fancy really to produce great multimedia. For example, we're doing this podcast on Skype, which is a free tool. I didn't need any other equipment to do it or any expertise for video. iPhone 6 has amazing quality. Android has amazing quality to record video, and you slap it in a free video editing tool and you're good to go. Thinking outside the box and, don't immediately jump to the fact that you need bigger and better and more expensive resources, I think is really key to making sure that you're successful and you don't box yourself into thinking that you can't do some of the things that some of the larger brands are doing.
Absolutely. And that's probably a disruptor, right? Because, there's used to be that you had to go out with the whole big crew. The quality had to look really high. And it's really about the content that drives the messaging, even with the video. I mean, you can't just put something up there that's nonsense. It has to pertain to the messaging.
Yeah, we're on a level playing field.
Moving along, there's a couple more topics I want to cover with you, Stacy. One of those is I noted with great interest Josh Culling's article that's on and he talks about the new David and Goliath scenario for the business community. Because we were just talking about disruptive technology and that everybody can do it. Can you give us some examples of this David and Goliath scenario? And what I mean by that is, no longer do large corporations like Walmart or GM and these huge corporations have the leverage over the smaller companies in terms of communications. If people want to actively come in and use those tools, they're accessible to everybody. That's one aspect of it. But another aspect that Josh talks about on your blog, which I found very interesting, is the idea that people can contact in both a negative and a positive way a large corporation and their voice can be heard.
Oh, absolutely. So there's two really, really good points I want to make on the whole David and Goliath situation. And they come from a couple of my favorite brands. So I talked just a moment ago about how, thinking outside of the box and not thinking that you can't do the same tactics as big corporations, how that's not true, right? We can produce the same work. We can tell even better stories no matter the size of your organization. Take Uber, for example. Uber has an amazing story. They took the taxi cab model and they flipped it, on its head. And they completely changed the way that people travel from this little tiny startup to now Uber is everywhere. There was a quote last night. I was watching TV and someone said, you're in a bad area if there is no Uber. And that's crazy to me because a couple years ago, there was no Uber. There was no such thing as being able to call someone and get someone there in 2 minutes and have a ride for the fraction of the cost of a taxi cab, right? Uber is a great example of a startup or a small business that just really took a great story, disrupted the industry, was the David and became the Goliath. And now taxi companies are scared of Uber. They're working against Uber. There's another story. So everybody's into the whole organic movement and eating well and eating green and eating healthy, which is really, really wonderful. So stores like Whole Foods and Trader Joe's have really come into the forefront versus players like, Giant or Safeway or all those mainstream grocery stores. But the big problem with organic foods and eating healthy is what? It's expensive. So now there are these smaller chains of grocery stores that have dramatically, listened to consumer needs through creative listening, and they changed the prices, or they figured out a way to lower their prices. So now people can eat organic and at the cost of regular groceries. And now Whole Foods and Trader Joe's and Mom's are competing with these teeny tiny grocery stores. Again, the David coming the Goliath. And it's all because they're doing creative consumer listening, taking consumer feedback, responding, and creating great media strategies to perpetuate that story and share it and get really, really, really great awareness.
That's so true. And you brought up some very good positive points. I'd like to actually even bring up one that maybe is kind of a negative point, but was used in a positive way. We have a wonderful pharmacy up the street. Happens to be CVS. I like them very much. They do great work, but they used to be 24 hours. And I'm caring for many family members, both on the older spectrum and the younger spectrum. I'm a busy mom. And they changed the hours of service, no longer 24 hours. And I said to them, well, who made this decision? And everybody, of course, at the local CVS said, oh, the corporation made the decision. We didn't have any kind of say-so about it. But the thing that was very upsetting to me is they let two of their absolutely very best pharmacists go, who helped me greatly with the care of my father and filling prescriptions at 3:00 in the morning. People don't get sick between 9 to 5.
Right.
And so these were guys that pulled out all stops always and consistently to help me. And I just said, I have to do something about this. I kept saying, well, can I leave a note for these two people to let them know how much I appreciated the service that they provided to me? No, they don't come in anymore. They've been let go. Well, I got on Twitter and I said to, CVS, who made this decision? Why was this decision made? This isn't being responsive to customers. This is just, kind of like, oh, okay, I didn't necessarily get the response that I was looking for from that, but I felt like, okay, there was some accountability for what this corporation did to the consumer. And I'm not letting it go at just that. That's, I do intend to follow up about this. And I think it does allow for the little guy and the little gal to be an advocate for the things that we like and the things where we see injustice done. And that's just one example, but those examples are all around us, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. The best brands in the world use feedback that they get from their consumers via social media to improve their products and services. And like I said earlier, the brands that don't are missing out on really, really valuable opportunities to acquire new customers, to acquire new advocates, to turn the naysayers into yay-sayers. All of those things can be done with social media. Every brand from small to large. I know many who have really active social media monitoring strategies, and the ones that are the ones replying and listening are the ones that get the most positive sentiment. It's simple as that, because people, you had a problem and you wanted to be heard. So you took to these channels expecting to be heard. And when you get a reply from a brand, it creates a connection and it makes you feel important as a consumer, and it helps shape your perception of that brand because that brand had that one-on-one connection with you. And any brand of any size can do that.
And conversely, when they don't respond, that's another message too.
Yeah, that's a big deal. When you don't respond, it's almost like you're saying something, but you're saying something very negative. Silence sometimes says the biggest thing, is one thing that I've consistently heard throughout my 10 years in the space. Not responding is, it's kind of one of the worst things you could do, because then the consumer feels ignored, they feel neglected, they feel like you're hiding something. It's a terrible experience for the consumer. And, 5 years ago, it might have been okay. But today, most Fortune 500 companies, I think, 90% of them are on social media doing this type of listening and responding. Many, many, many in the nonprofit sector, mid-sized business sector, they're all on social media. They're doing this. It's absolutely necessary today. It's no longer a if. It's a must.
Yes. And conversely, on a positive note, was working with a software company. It happened to be Network Solutions. And I had a problem with some things that they were helping me with. And I kept having to call back and was not getting a satisfactory answer. And finally, I got a customer service representative who intervened and just did a great job of reestablishing my corporate accounts and getting everything set up beautifully. He spent over an hour with me, both on the phone and communicating by email, to get some things that were not set up properly established correctly. And I gave the gentleman a shout out on Twitter, and the whole corporation responded to that. Way to go, guy. You get our award for the week, great customer response. And that was very satisfying to me. Like, okay, I said something that was positive about this employee, and he in turn got recognized for it. Whereas the old way was like, okay, just punch the clock and go home.
Yeah, you feel like you're making a difference. I also worked a number of years in customer service, especially through social media, and you wouldn't believe the difference that it makes in someone's day. One, when they get service that makes them happy, that retains their business, and then two, the type of recognition that you get, because this was a type of service that, again, wasn't around between 5 and 10 years ago. You would pick up the phone, or you would do email, and you would wait on the line, or wait for a response time, and that's just not the way the world works anymore. We live in a world where people expect things immediately. We're in an on-demand economy. You push a button, you get to watch a movie on Netflix. You push a button on your phone, you get an Uber to your front door. People want to push a button and be able to talk to a brand when they have a problem with it, or when they want to give some sort of feedback, even if it is positive. So being accommodating to that and realizing that we live in this real-time world is something that's not just reserved for corporate brands. Any size brand can also engage in those practices.
You've done such a great job of explaining all this. I mean, my next topic that we were going to talk about is crisis communications, but I think we just rolled right into it, right?
Yeah.
Were there other things that I didn't cover about crisis communications that maybe large corporations and nonprofits might want to know about, in ways that Cision can help in a crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, crisis PR is every communicator's, worst nightmare. We probably have nightmares and roll around in sweats in our sleep, hoping that we don't wake up to a crisis. I know it's my worst nightmare, but as communicators, again, no matter what size of your business, you have to be prepared for it. And having a pulse on your industry, exactly what's happening, what's trending in the news, not just about your brand, what's happening in the industry, and then listening to the conversations about your brand, and then listening to conversations about your competitors can help you kind of, preemptively hear or find out about a crisis that might be able to strike. So 90% of the work in crisis communications is preparation. If you haven't prepared for a crisis and a crisis hits, you're too late. So, tools like Cision help you gather the data that you need in order to fight a crisis should it happen, be able to reach out to the media and correct misinformation, or provide executive spokespersons or anything like that to make sure that you're on top of it the moment that it happens, and that you're proactively responding before it's too late and before the media or influencers or anybody else in the public runs away with the story.
Excellent. And you will definitely, if you're using the Cision powerful tool, you will definitely not be a non-responder.
That's right.
Because you've got access to too much good information and too many things. We could talk for hours, I'm sure, about all the many wonderful things that Cision does to help businesses and to help us communicators help businesses better communicate. Thank you so much for adding that. And Stacy, tell us a little bit about how Cision found you and how you found Cision, and a little bit about your own professional background.
Oh, I appreciate that. So I'm currently the senior communications manager at Cision. I've been with the company for 10 years, which actually is my entire career. I have an unbelievable love and loyalty for Cision ever since I started with it 10 years ago. I started off as a media researcher, and I learned about changes in the media, particularly television media. And it was at a time where there was a lot of consolidation and acquisition and mergers and conglomerates, and newsrooms were shrinking because of the rise of digital. And I found that really fascinating, the rise of digital journalism. So I followed that, and I led a team of researchers for some time. And then when social media came around, especially social media for brands and marketing and for PR, I kind of hopped on that train early and used social media for research and creating relationships with journalists, which is how I came to my role on the PR team. So ever since social media came about, I think I started doing all that maybe 2008-ish. I joined the PR team and started learning more about the media and outreach and influencer relations tactics. And I've just been addicted ever since, because Cision provides such amazing tools and is such a great resource for communicators. I love being the person who learns about these new tools and tactics as they evolve, and being able to share those with other communicators. So absolutely love it here.
That's wonderful. And you do a phenomenal job of explaining that, because I am a communicator, and I so appreciate the information that you so willingly shared with us today, Stacy, and with all communicators, and with those who aren't, about why they should be, right?
Yeah, thank you.
So Cision is a fabulous tool. We appreciate all the help that Cision has given us in the past and in moving forward. And again, I thank you very much for your time and participation today on the PPG podcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much again for having me.